Raider Nation, it is Saturday afternoon, and we are going to go through all of the stats and all of the numbers and the latest analytics surrounding the Raiders' first preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're going to talk about who played the most, who didn't play that much, and how well did people perform compared to who they played against and how much time they played. And at the end of this video, I know there's all this talk going on about Josh Jacobs. You see it on television, NBC, NFL Network, Fox Sports. Josh Jacobs is going to be traded from the Las Vegas Raiders because he played in preseason. And even we talked about this on our channel, and I'll give you my final thoughts and verdict on it at the end of this video. But first, we're going to go through all this numbers, and there is so much to go through. We are really going to talk about every single position. As you can see, there's tons of new numbers that have come out, and I cannot wait to get to it. We're going to start off talking about the defensive line. That's the first thing we need to talk about right off the bat, and that is Malcolm Koonce having 24 pass rushing snaps and generating 3 pressures. He actually had the most pressures out of any defender by the Raiders against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we know, it's not the greatest lineup you're going against. If anything, Jacksonville played a little more of their starting defense than they did their offense. However, they did not play Josh Allen at defense at all. But the offensive line, Malcolm Koonce went against a decent one, and you also saw Vernon Butler get some action as well, make a few plays at that nose tackle position. And this guy has an opportunity. There is a little window of opportunity for Vernon Butler to at least be number 2 on this depth chart at this nose tackle position if Jonathan Hankins does not come back soon. We know he is currently on the physically unable to perform list, and we got to see what's going to happen with this guy, because if not, we're going to have to roll with Vernon Butler. He's a former first-round pick. Hopefully, he could live up to that. He had the highest pass rush grade out of any defensive lineman in this game for the Raiders, 72.2 PFF pass rushing grade with the 25% pass rushing rate. Now, you're going to have that rate when you only have 8 snaps, but think about it. He had literally 3 times as few snaps as Malcolm Koonce, but still almost generated as many pressures, just one shy. That's pretty impressive there. And then you got Matthew Butler, the rookie. 13 pass rush snaps with 1 pressure, not quite as impressive, but still was able to pop a little bit on the screen, having a 7% pass rush rate. So Matthew Butler, somebody else who could maybe be that 3-tech defensive lineman in the sub defense. That is a role that we think, needs to be filled. And some people even thought Ndamukong Suh could have been a guy to fill that void. But hopefully the coaching staff is interested in Matthew Butler and what he could bring to the table there. There is a role that he could compete for definitely in the regular season. The linebackers, Divine Diablo, the young guy we're all excited about. Disappointed last year how he performed in preseason against the 49ers, but he did well today, or yesterday, I guess, 2 days ago, with a 70.4 PFF run defensive grade. Did not play that many snaps at all. We're going to go into how many snaps each of these guys played. As you can see, not much if he only had 4 snaps on run defense. Not much for Diablo. Jayon Brown got in the mix as well after Diablo. And the one guy, Darian Butler, we're going to talk about him a little bit more. He was somebody I was really excited about because you saw reports that he's rolling with the ones in camp. He has that Arizona State Sun Devils connection to the linebacker coach, Antonio Pierce. However, it did not manifest itself on the field. If I will say so myself, Darian Butler had 3 missed tackles on the day, led the Raiders in missed tackles among all defenders. So that was sort of disappointing to see. We noticed it a little bit during the game, during our live game stream that we do every single game. And hopefully he can clean it up, because somebody like Luke Masterson, I really didn't hear much about this guy during camp, but he looked pretty fresh. He had the highest, one of the highest defensive grades among linebackers, and played a legit amount of snaps, as much as Darian Butler, as you can see on your screen. And that's where you see that 18% there, positively graded play. You see him pop up on the field when you watch the tape, always around the football. And maybe Luke Masterson is a little higher on the depth chart than we think, and perhaps he can compete with Darian Butler here. And they say only 2 missed tackles as a team. That is not true. Darian Butler for sure had 3 missed tackles. I was just looking at it a little bit earlier. So Alex Leatherwood had a good game. A lot of people were still critical of the offensive line, but in the run game especially, the offensive line did really well. He improved in the pass game. The main guy who had a rough game that we're all paying attention to was Brandon Parker, because he had a game that was close to the level of Thayer Mumford, and Thayer Mumford's a rookie. Brandon Parker should be a lot better than this. We thought he would maybe even be sort of a veteran leader on the team because it's a young offensive line, and he's been in the NFL for some time. This is a big opportunity for him, and it didn't look great going against the number 1 pick, Trayvon Walker, during the matchup. Obviously, that's going to be tough, but we're going to have a lot more tougher defenders than Trayvon Walker in the regular season, the rookie first-round pick. I mean, the first game, it's Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. And I know Khalil Mack's up there in age, but these guys are going to be tougher than Trayvon Walker. So we really need to be concerned about this right tackle spot. And hopefully Alex Leatherwood is the guy, because if he's not, and we have to rely on Brandon Parker, and he performs anyway close to how he performed against Trayvon Walker against the Jaguars, it's not going to be that fun of a season. It's not going to be. I'm just going to be completely honest. You can have all the weapons in the world, but if you don't have time to throw, it's going to all go to shit. It's going to all go to shit, to be completely honest. Dylan Parham was out there, played a little bit of center and guard, had a good pass blocking grade, which is good to see considering the fact that he had a really good amount of snaps. So that's a very positive thing you see from Dylan Parham. They don't have his run blocking grade on here, but it was a little bit lower than the rest of the team, to be completely honest. I think Jarrett Stidham is for sure the number 2 QB. Chase Garbers had a limited opportunity in the fourth quarter. I wonder if that will expand. Perhaps in the second game, it's going to be all Nick Mullins and Chase Garbers, and Josh McDaniels is going to try to figure out, like, who's my number 3 QB. And to be honest, like, if Stidham, the way he performed, I think the Raiders should just roll with 2 QBs. I mean, he's going to be perfectly fine. Hopefully you can keep somebody like Mullins and Chase Garbers on the practice squad. I think you have better luck with Garbers staying on the practice squad and nobody else plucking him, because I think Nick Mullins would get plucked somewhere, especially if there's a QB injury to some other team down the road. But I don't think that would happen to the rookie Chase Garbers. So hopefully we see a little bit more of him, but I was really impressed with Jarrett Stidham. Yes, there was a couple deep passes that seemed a little short, but all in all, you look at these grades and you look at the fact that he was able to make a decent amount of intermediate and deep throws, and I actually thought he did a really good job buying some time when he had the opportunity to roll out. But there were, I would say, at least one to two plays where I felt like the pressure wasn't exactly the offensive line's fault, and it was either the fact that there weren't any receivers open or Jarrett Stidham had an inability to make a decision. But when you look at the contrast between Nick Mullins and Stidham, I think just by watching the game, it became very clear, like, who's the number 2 QB. Let me know what you guys think. Who is the number 2 QB on this Raiders team? I'm going to give it to Stidham right there. And we've talked about the running backs extensively. I have a video about what's happening to the Raiders running back room. I know this is something that is sensitive to a lot of Raiders fans, but look, something is going on there, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later towards the end, but something's going on. Something's going on when Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, Chandler Jones are not playing any reps, and then you got Josh Jacobs playing reps. I'm just going to say that. And you got Foster Moreau playing some reps too, because, hey, he's a number 2 guy. So seems like the number 2 guy has played reps and the number 1s didn't. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Either way, Amir Abdullah seemed like a solid third down back that really popped off and stood out to a lot of people. And also Zamir White, seeming like there's going to be no hesitation. People were wondering, all right, is this some guy who has to acclimate to the NFL? Maybe he'll excel next year. Zamir White, it just seemed like he's ready to go. He just seemed like an NFL back immediately in this preseason game. And it seemed like when you watched it, he was clearly just ahead of most of the players around him. It just clearly seemed like he had more talent than those around him. So it was really impressive to see. Zamir White had that 82.5% of his rushing yards coming after contact. Physical back. We know we like that as Raiders fans for sure. I will say Chris Jones had a very impressive game. I know it's going against backups, but he was the only Raiders player to have a dropped interception. There's no interception on the day, but he's the only guy who actually got himself in position to get an interception. He had a couple pass breakups as well and did not allow one reception while he was on the field, and we'll see a little bit later, he was on the field for a decent amount of time. Tyree Gillespie, yes, he allowed a decent amount of yards. Farley, though, however, what really isn't showing up here is how physical he was on the field. You just saw him taking shots after shots. I think I saw him rock Nathan Cottrell a couple of times, and I almost felt bad for Nathan Cottrell. But, hey, Farley. And then Josh McDaniels was asked about him after the game, like, what do you like about this guy? What's his deal? And he's just saying Farley's always been this physical dude to take it up a notch. Who knows if this guy could be a solid special teams player and some solid depth for the Raiders. I really did like how he performed the other night. And out of the receivers, this is tough because we only had one target for Mac Hollins, and that was the one guy I really wanted to see, but perhaps he's so high on the depth chart, maybe he's solidified as that number 2 outside receiver that the Raiders didn't feel like they even needed to showcase him that much, but he did have that little quick RPO pass that was sort of a dud and didn't really work out. However, you had Tyron Johnson, I believe, lead the team in targets, and Keelan Cole had to leave the game early because he had that crazy shot. But that reverse by Keelan Cole was very impressive, I will say. Demarcus Robinson had a few catches for short yardage, but one thing I noticed is it was usually when the quarterback was under duress, and Demarcus Robinson seemed like he was able to sort of improvise and at least just be a safety valve for your quarterback in some of those tough situations. So I know the yards don't pop off for Robinson, but I found that really impressive by him, if I will say so myself. So right now we have some pass blocking grades and some snap counts right here. You see 30 snaps for Brandon Parker, 35 for Alex Bars. And what you really have here is who gave up the most amount of pressures. Brandon Parker and Alex Bars led the team, each giving up 3 pressures. And then you have Thayer Mumford and Leatherwood after. Now, obviously, Brandon Parker played 30 snaps. That's a decent amount of snaps. It's only 2 more, though, than Thayer Mumford. So you gave up an extra pressure than Thayer Mumford, even though you only played 2 more snaps. However, I will say Brandon Parker went up against, more difficult talent. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The talent was tougher that Brandon Parker went up against compared to Thayer Mumford, but you just would expect something a little bit better than that. It's just what you would expect, and he was the only person who gave up some sacks. You see that 2 sacks right here towards the end. This is where you see all the pressure stuff. 2 sacks and a QB hit is what he gave up, and Alex Bars had 3 hurries. Leatherwood, however, 2 pressures and only a hit and a hurry. Pretty good going up against second team / first team-ish defense for the Jacksonville Jaguars. No Josh Allen, though. Let's just be completely honest. It's not completely the number 1, but that's what we had there. And Lester Cotton Sr., really impressive pass blocking grade, 71.2, the highest out of all these defenders here on the list. And these are all the people who played the most. These are all the people that Josh McDaniels and Coach Brasillo wanted to see play, wanted to see how they could compete. You see Lester Cotton Sr. had the most snaps, 44. It's closer to the name of his position. You can see that right there, 44 snaps, meaning the coaching staff just wanted to see, is this our guy? Could this guy play a large amount of time? And now they have plenty of film on him. And according to PFF and a lot of these people's and a lot of these stats, he did really live up to expectations. And you even saw Chris Collinsworth bringing him up, So if Chris Collinsworth is on his nuts, he's probably going to start. I mean, let's just be real. That's how this media train works. In terms of the defensive line, who got the most pressures? Who generated the most pressures while they're on the field? You see Tashawn Bauer, former New England Patriot, 29 snaps, had 4 pressures, led the team in pressures despite the fact that he had 29 snaps. You have people like Jerry Green, who had 36 snaps, a lot more than Tashawn Bauer. Neil Farrell Jr. had 34 snaps as well, and then Darian Butler was able to get a couple pressures. That's what I like to see in this game. Was our linebackers blitzing. We did a few more blitzes than I'm used to because I'm so used to Gus Bradley last year, where we never blitzed. We never blitzed at all, and Butler got 2 pressures despite the fact that, in my opinion, he had a rough game. He had a rough game, in my opinion. Kendall Vickers didn't play much. Neither did Vernon Butler, just 19 snaps, 16 snaps here and there. Maybe Vernon Butler is a little higher in the depth chart, and that's why you don't want to play him that much. That could be a possibility, but only one pressure right here that we could see on the day for Vernon Butler and Kendall Vickers as well. So Malcolm Kuntz also had 3 pressures right behind Tashawn Bauer next to Neil Farrell and had a really good defensive grade. And he did play a decent amount, 29 snaps. That's a good amount there for Malcolm Kuntz. Either way, the receivers is something that I think we need to talk about. We focus a lot on the running backs. We've talked about the running backs in other videos extensively. Check out my video, What's Happening to the Raiders Running Back Room. But what I want to say here is, who got the lion's share of targets? And it was obviously Tyron Johnson. Disappointing to see that drop. I mean, the thing that he did is he beat his defender deep. He saw that long streak. Jarrett Stidham, I think, put it on the money right in front of him, and he dropped it. He did drop it. It would have been probably a touchdown, maybe at the 1-yard line for Tyron Johnson. However, I do like the fact that he was open. And I do think the more he gets some reps, maybe a couple more targets in training camp on a daily basis, I do think he can get over this drop thing, and we do need somebody like him with that speed who could get open on a deep pass like that. Very impressive stuff, to be honest. Like that is the hardest thing for a lot of receivers most of the time, is actually just getting open. That's what's actually difficult. So I still was impressed. You see that 27.3 drop grade. Obviously, it's going to be horrible because of that. And Zamir White had 4 targets as well, along with Jordan Veazey, the UC Berkeley guy who was a wide receiver participant in Kaepernick's workout. Jordan Veazey had 4 targets, but he played towards the end of the game with Garbers, so not high on the depth chart, obviously. Keelan Cole left the game early, and then this is who had the most targets, by the way. Everybody under these players had only 1 target. People like Foster Moreau, stuff like that. So Josh Jacobs, I mean, he was one of the top 10 players who had the most targets in this game, which is really interesting for preseason. I mean, it's just something you can't ignore that, really. Now, who had the most snaps on defense? Like, who played the most on defense? Chris Jones, we talked about him, had the dropped interception, did really well. Look at that coverage grade, 83.7, highest on the defense for the Raiders against the Jaguars. And he had 2 pass breakups. So he led with pass breakups, I think generally with just allowing the fewest amount of yards with the most amount of targets. 2 targets, allowing 0 yards. Impressive stuff for Chris Jones. I mean, perhaps he could see himself on this roster. He was signed a little bit later after free agency, so it's interesting to see him excel in that way. And Bryce Cosby, the safety, transitioned to slot cornerback, and we know Patrick Graham likes to have safeties at slot corner. Bryce Cosby from Ball State, I think, did really well in terms of just the physicality that he brought to the slot position. Now, he did give up some receptions here and there, but, I mean, I thought it was impressive, especially playing that many snaps. And we talked about Masterson. Darian Butler with the 3 missed tackles. That's why you see that tackle grade at 29.1 for Darian Butler, number 4 on the list here. Some rough stuff. He's going to really need to turn it around. I thought he was a shoo-in to make this roster, and there's a lot of hype for him. You know, having that connection there, running with the ones in minicamp and then a little bit in training camp. And now that's sort of dwindling away, to be completely honest. So these guys all played the most. Take it with a grain of salt. Probably means they're a little lower on the depth chart, to be honest. You saw sort of a different strategy for the offense. You saw a lot of people who you might actually be able to see play in the future, play the most on offense. But on defense, it was a little bit of the reverse. The people who played the most are people that you don't know. You know, some of them probably aren't even going to for sure make the roster, just to be completely blunt, aside from the rookies who you have on a really good contract, like Matthew Butler and Neil Farrell Jr. right here. Now, people who played the least, just to back up what I just said. People who played the least on defense, sorry if you heard that, my cat knocked over a water bottle, but Andrew Billings is somebody who seems like a starter now. With Bilal Nichols, Jonathan Hankins struggling to come back from that physically unable to perform list, I think Andrew Billings is might be one of the guys, or the guy. 7 total snaps. You've been hearing some hype about him. He started out the game in the very first quarter. Seems like if Bilal Nichols and Hankins are ready to go, he's for sure going to be the starter for this team at defensive tackle. So Duran Harmon didn't play that much, along with Jayon Brown, Abram, and Divine Diablo. I think there's a competition right now between Diablo and Jayon Brown for that linebacker spot when you are in the sub defense. However, when we are in our base defense, I think you'll see both of them on the field. Nate Hobbs also played outside primarily. You didn't see him in the slot at all, and he also only had 10 snaps, along with Trayvon Merring and Kyle Pecco. You saw him in a decent amount early on in the game, somebody who probably has risen in the depth chart with the absence of Hankins and Bilal Nichols. But interesting to see also at various moments, you see Jonathan Abram on the list with Duran Harmon. Various moments you saw like both of these safeties on the field. So Patrick Graham loves his safeties. I think Duran Harmon, Abram, and Merring will probably all see a good amount of playing time in the regular season. I feel like they're going to try to find a role for each of those guys. Now, least amount of snaps, least amount of total snaps for players in the offensive side of the preseason game. Jacobs is on that list, despite the fact that Jacobs had some of the least amount of snaps, but he had the most action. Like every time he was there, the ball went to him. He had the 2 targets on passing, and then obviously it was about 5 or 6 runs, right? So pretty much every single time he was on the field, he saw some action, even though he didn't play as a whole that much. Kenyon Drake only had 1 more snap on top of that, and then you see John Simpson sort of playing some of the least out of all the starting offensive linemen. Out of all the projected starting offensive linemen, John Simpson played the least. You saw Andre James in there a decent amount. Lester Cotton. Obviously, Colton Miller didn't play at all. And then Alex Leatherwood, of course. And then the most. We talked about Lester Cotton. Parham played a lot along with Tyron Johnson and Leatherwood. So really the whole starting O-line outside of Colton Miller and John Simpson played the most. Andre James, not on this list right now because, after a certain point, we did switch at center for Parham. He was switched from guard to center. So Parham ended up playing the most out of all the, centers on the team, I guess you'd say. But Andre James still stood in the game a decent amount. I mean, you saw him there in the second quarter. So yeah, that's interesting to see considering his contract situation. But these are the people that you saw the most on the field. Jarrett Stidham, of course, played a lot. And you saw that moment when they took out Nick Mullins. And then they took him out and put Jarrett Stidham back in. I mean, I thought that was kind of weird. I thought you were going to see Nick Mullins take off and continue to play, a couple series in a row. But Josh McDaniels, for whatever reason, maybe didn't like how Nick Mullins handled his first series. You saw the muff snap and then threw Jarrett Stidham back in there. And I think that's why you see that high snap count for somebody like Jarrett Stidham. Either way, I think it was a great game. And to be completely honest, when we're talking about what is happening with the Las Vegas Raiders right now, and you heard Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk, and I believe I'm blanking on this guy's name, Max Esselbaum, something like that. He's on one of those fantasy football shows, but people are freaking out about Josh Jacobs getting, those snaps in preseason, and it is a little concerning when you see Colton Miller not playing, Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, all these sorts of players, all these starters, Devontae, Derek Carr, of course, not getting any action, but a lot of people say, well, we're switching our scheme. We're switching from a zone run scheme to, a gap scheme. And, yes, Josh Jacobs has played zone run the majority of his career, but there are still several plays you can go back and look at and saw where he did do gap runs. And Josh McDaniels does have access to all that film. So I don't think there's any confusion there. Yes, teams tend to run a certain scheme a higher percentage of a time, but they still do the other styles as well. They still do gap runs, even though if they are primarily a zone run scheme, you're still going to see a percentage of those there. And you saw that last night. You saw us, even though not last night, but during the preseason game, you saw us most of the time do gap runs, but then we also did a few zones. There still were a few of those plays out there. So I do think Josh McDaniels does have access to that. And will Josh Jacobs get traded? Look, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you, but if he was the number one running back on the depth chart for sure, and the Raiders were all in on him and Josh McDaniels was all in on Josh Jacobs, then I do believe he would not have played last night. I think if you really were going to rely on him to help take you to the promised land this year, and you're very certain about that, then you just don't risk putting him out there for preseason. So, yes, I do think in Josh McDaniels' view, he is evaluating Josh Jacobs. And in a certain sense, the jury is still out with the way that he's looking at this. I think the jury is still out for him. He's making a decision about it. He didn't play Brandon Bolden. People keep saying, oh, every running back played. And even Josh McDaniels said that at the press conference. He said, I think every back played. And he didn't play Brandon Bolden because he knows how he feels about Brandon Bolden. And look, when I say that Brandon Bolden is the number one back on the team, I mean in Josh McDaniels' eyes, he is number one in job security, and he will be on the field a lot more than Raiders fans think. Brandon Bolden had his highest amount of snaps in his entire career last year, around 390. And let me tell you guys something. Almost all of them, besides like 50, were on passing downs. And the Raiders are going to pass a majority of the time. All NFL teams pass about like 67% compared to 37% runs. I think it's going to be even a higher percentage of passing with the Raiders this year because we have so many weapons. We got the Adams, Waller, Moreau, Renfro. You can go on and on, right? And you got Derek Carr. So I think we are going to see not the New England offense you've seen over the past 3 years. I think it's going to be more pass heavy because, quite frankly, New England hasn't had the receiving core in the past 3 years to even be pass heavy, even with Tom Brady. So Brandon Bolden, I think, is going to be on the field a lot because we are going to be passing a lot. And I think every single time that it's an obvious passing situation, even when it's not, because I think Brandon Bolden's going to be on the field. But I will predict that he probably will only have 50 attempts, similar to New England, because New England's running back group last year. Let me just break this down for you as we conclude this video. New England had Sony Michel play in the preseason, and they eventually traded him away. And he was in the last year of his contract, fifth-year option decline, traded away to the Los Angeles Rams last year for a 5th and 6th round pick. And what's crazy about that is he played a little bit in preseason. They were able to shop him and sent him away right before the regular season, 2 weeks before, sent him away to the Rams. New England also had injuries to James White. You saw Ramondre Stevenson play a decent amount along with Damian Harris. Damian Harris had the most amount of carries in the run game. But Brandon Bolden was out there almost as much as Damian Harris and almost, as pretty much the second most out of every player on that team on the passing downs. And keep in mind, New England with Mac Jones, there were games where Mac Jones threw the ball 10 times. They were primarily a running team. I think you would have seen even more Brandon Bolden out there if they had good receivers, if they had a better passing game straight up. So as far as Josh Jacobs, do I think he's being shopped? If I'm going to be completely honest with you, yes. And I do think Mike Florio could be very annoying at Pro Football Talk, but he said he was able to acknowledge a certain vibe out there when he was there at that game on the sideline with Josh Jacobs' relationship with Josh McDaniels. And I don't think he's just making stuff up. And I don't think you put a running back out there and risk him getting hurt if you believe he can take you to the promised land this year. I don't think you do that. And I think maybe you could see Zamir White be our Damian Harris. Maybe Amir Abdullah is our Ramondre Stevenson. And then we also already have Brandon Bolden, who was on the Patriots last year. That doesn't sound crazy to me. That sounds like it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. Now, do I hope Josh Jacobs stays? Yes. Do I support this decision by Josh McDaniels if he is putting Josh Jacobs on the block? No. I think Josh Jacobs is a very talented back. I think there's a reason why he's been to a Pro Bowl. I think he does force some of the most missed tackles out of any running back in the NFL. And I like what he's done with the Raiders in the past. I think he's sacrificed a lot for the Las Vegas Raiders and the Oakland Raiders. He was there in 2019. So I am rooting for Josh Jacobs to be a Raider. But right now, I don't know if that's Josh McDaniels' plan, to be completely honest with you guys. Like this video if you haven't already, and subscribe to the Raiders Rundown for more Raiders content. My name is WiFiWillie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.